So I started reading the trilogy recently. I just started the third one, and I'm not sure if I'm going to talk about the other two. If I do, it's going to be both together because that's how they kind of are. I watched the anime maybe a year after it came out, and I forgot all about the last half of it and the order of things, and I thought it was like it ended differently outside of like the last 20 seconds. So I don't know, man. My memory's fucked up, I guess. This is actually going to be a really short one because I'm also writing another thing where it's like, oh, here's the differences between the anime and the VN, right? And while it needs some like editing and shit, it's over like 10 pages long. I think it's gonna be my longest video in a while. I think the only one that's even contends with it is like Mormasa. I think that's like a 45-minute video. And I'm considering putting the last part of the VN into the thing too, and that's gonna be like another 40 minutes. So it's probably gonna be like 3 parts or some shit. Also, I'm talking about the remake. It loses the point, but you know when it was supposed to happen, and the themes they were supposed to show also show up here, so I doubt I'm missing much at all. I think you get a rewind ability for the remake as well, but it's not like you're really gonna need it. The game's pretty easy, and the action animations are probably just for the remake as well. A lot of them actually pretty cool. Also, I'm gonna fuck up every name in this damn VN. Anyways, the VN is great, but the pacing varies quite a bit. The beginning up till leaving the village is amazing. It takes its time, it puts the protagonist Koro in a place of importance onto the community, and what I mean by that is that it's not a one-time thing to set up future events. It takes like 3 or 4 events to make them trust Okoro to the point he's like one of the village's pillars. And I'm pretty sure it was more than that, but let's just say like 4, but I think it was like 7. It piecemeals characters and each still reoccur every so often, especially the main 3 and Theo or whatever his name was. I think it's like Teoro, but I just call him Theo. And almost any time there was a sentimental moment, it was built up prior from like 3 or 4 events beforehand, and everything makes sense. Like, oh, this is great. But it kind of shits itself in the middle third of the VN. There's a lot of slice of life, and it's all pretty good, but there's nothing of importance really happening either. And by that, I mean all the antagonists are pretty one note or trivial. They come in, they make a mess, you beat the shit out of them, and then they're forgotten the next scene. And I'll mention more about that in the spoiler section. There's also something by the middle where it just felt like it was a filler shit for the remaining units that didn't go with Hokuro to the different region. That filler stuff might be useful later on in the third installment. I'm only like 20 minutes in, so maybe not, I don't know. And then it brings it all back for the last third where everything is done well again. Certain scenes that were happening in tail end of the first third have re-emerged to finish what they're going for. There's also a pretty good twist that I straight up forgot when I watched the anime over a decade ago. The finale sequence takes like 40 fucking minutes and you're forced to watch it on the intended pace to get the intended impact, and it works fucking great. Unfortunately, my game crashed halfway through and I was forced to sit there again from like the first 30 minutes, and it was ass. And I'm pretty sure if I was playing the original, I would have to start from the final boss again, and that took like 20 minutes because it has so much fucking HP. It's not even hard, it was just a tank. The ones that got the worst treatment screen time wise was Carla and Toka, and that's because in the anime, because I remember, oh, they had a lot of scenes. A lot of them were like, oh, it's their combat, otherwise they're just not there. Like Toka had maybe 2 scenes, and Carla had again another 2 scenes. It was like, okay. Kuro, Dori, and Gura also got almost nothing. Kuro at least got a lot in the filler, but whatever. And it kind of sucks because I actually like a lot of these characters, even with the minimal screen time they had, so I guess they were doing well. And for the gameplay, it's like a fucking different story. It's really boring. It's the worst part of the VN. It's too simple, and you're not gonna die on normal. And I'm pretty sure you're not gonna die in hard because I barely used the items, I barely used BP, and I didn't use any consumables because Eru just fixes everything for you. Honestly, the hardest unit is probably the first major boss since he has a finisher with Nawagi. And it might one-shot one of your guys, depending on positioning and depending on the character. Basically, it just gets kind of easier the more you progress. The final boss has way too much HP, like I said before, and it breaks the own moment. And I think why they did it that way is like, oh, everybody has an alternate final strike conversation for it. And like, well, let's make it long enough so everybody can spam theirs. But even when I spammed all of them, he still had like 2,000 HP left or some shit. Like, I'm not even sure if you can die from it because Eru, again, just heals so fucking much. It's never a worry. I did mostly a no BP run. I ran out of patience when the tankier enemies showed up from like the last third. I'm sure it's possible. Error support is just OP again. I also never used the consumable items, and you could just farm for those anyway if you wanted to for hard mode or whatever. So technically you could have Arrow solely doing the buffing instead of rather healing, but then you don't get any XP, so I never did it. So it's like, yeah, whatever. The mages kind of suck ass unless you grind BP to raise their attack power. Then they become OP. Carla is OP until you grind for BP, and then she gets pushed down since her speed stat isn't great. I'd say overall, with before and after grinding, Oboro, Beniwa, and Toka are like the better characters, and the two mages if you just grind. The archers are pretty good as well, but they get screwed over with the lesser movement stat. I actually completed this 100% and I read it because it wasn't really worth it for the extra hours because I still had low BP. I think everybody's only like maybe 30 or 40 attack or something. And that's with the items I equipped with them. Because the thing is, like, the way I did BP is I did like half on attack and half on defense. And I heard or I read that's like, no, it's like every 2 attack you put 1 defense. And in that case, like, oh, okay, maybe that's why you speed it up. For me, it took a while because how my choices, right? So then you have to do all these training maps because these maps include these unique items and you have to do like 5 iterations of it. And some maps are like, oh, there's no unique items except for the last iteration. And you don't know, so you just have to do them all until you get them all, and it's ass. And I wouldn't mind it if the items were worth it, but for the extra mode that unlocks when you get all the items, it bans you from using items. Like, great, why the hell did you even make me do this? Also, they gave you all the units like specific stats and levels, and that was a blessing for some, like Theo, or it really screwed up some of my other characters like Oboro or Haru and Benui, because I had a lot more defense on them than what they gave me. It's like, great, you give me weaker characters. I still did it in like 1 run. Again, the game's fucking easy, it's not hard. As long as you do your finishers half the time or do your co-ops, it'll work out. I'm giving this a 7.5. It's probably still going to be in my top 50 like favorite VNs, but there's just a lot of things I nitpick about it. A lot of the Alo or the Emperors don't really have a presence, like I said. They just randomly happen. Some of your units get very little screen time. The load of the slice of life is uneven, where 30 or 50% is nothing but combat. But the last third had like a specific section where the slice of life just didn't end. And I had fun. I actually prefer that. I'd rather have no gameplay and made all the sections into scenes, and it'd be better off for it. But if you're gonna make it have gameplay, then spread the scenes out. If I set the scoring just on time spans, where it's like, oh, from the beginning up to when you get Benui, and then the final war to the end, I'd give it like a 9. They kind of shot themselves in the foot when the best villain died really early on. So this is spoilers. Video is basically done. If anything, after the spoilers, I'm probably going to put the 20 minutes or so of the final strikes and shit, but that's also spoilers because the final boss is in there. So like I mentioned before, the bosses or the Aulos or the Oros, depending how you pronounce the shit, because I'm breaking all these names, they're really just whatever. Technically, I'm not counting Inkala. I attribute Nuwangi and Benui as the bosses for that chapter, right? But then there's Sonkasu, had like a screen time of maybe 20 seconds, and then you don't see him for maybe 2 fights, and then he's the boss fight, and then an extra 20 seconds, like, great, you wasted time. And this was a great way to have Karulau to have more scenes, because like, oh, it's with their brother, but even their time is barely anything. It had a really good scene when they got there, and that's like the first, let's say like the first 10%, and then everything else is just a waste of time. The weirdest one is Niue, where he just fucks off for a huge chunk of the VN. If you consider him like chapter 3, he only comes back at chapter 6 or 7, depending on if you count the fillers as a section or not. And he actually has a reason for it, but no one in Okuro's group really questions about it. It's like, not like, hey, where's Niue? Oh, did you look? No, there's like one scene in the beginning, and then like for 3 chapters, nothing about him. It's like, at least bring another scene. It's like, hey, did you find who's doing this? But no, it's like, no, fuck. Then Niue just comes back. It's like, oh, right. If you have like a low attention span, or let's say you play this sporadically, so let's say you take like 2 months to finish this VN, maybe you're not even remember who Niue even was because it was like so long ago. It really just hurts the VN when the best developed villains was like Nuwangi, because even D is just kind of there. And D works because you can consider like, oh, Kuya was the last challenge and D is just the guy working in the background. And like everything after Q is just like, oh, it's just a victory lap, and it makes sense that way because yeah, it was kind of easy. But yeah, I'd probably put it as a 9 if they removed the combat and provided like an extra scene or 2 per combat scenario. They put in extra work where everybody in the team has like a different voice lines. They changed their eye shape and shit for the finishers and co-op finishers in the last boss fight. And it's like, did you really have to do this? And I appreciate it. It's like, ah, man, I should raise it to an 8. And maybe I will it in like a year when I forget like all the nitpicky parts. The boss still has way too much fucking HP than it ever needs, and I can't even imagine how long it'd take if you're doing the no BP run like I was doing for like the first 3/4 of the VN. So right now I'm going to put all the finishers in one little video, and that's going to take like 20 minutes. So this review is going to look really long, and it's not supposed to be because that just finishers. And I'm also doing the comparison shit, which I'm done, and it's like 5,500 words or something. It's like 10 pages long. It's going to be annoying to talk about for the whole thing. And I'm probably going to split it into like 3 parts because I'm also putting the whole final part of the VN into the video, and that's like 40 minutes again. I'm going to cut parts of it out because they were like, oh, they're the unnecessary parts for my whole point. So it's probably like 3 parts long.
あれをやるぞ。でもやるんだ。本当によろしいのですか。カモン、やるんだ。わかりました。影縫いの雨、兄者様をお待ちします。これが最後の務めです。ういっす。一世一代のこの勇姿、しっかり刻んでもらいやすか。こいつが我らのカルラ、援護。
ええ、いいですわよ。誰にもあなたの邪魔をさせませんわ。
せめてそれがしの手で。どうした？まさか総大将抜けた面で送ろうってんじゃねえだろうな。総大将への最後の見せ場じゃねえのか。
下がってもいいのです。今度は神がお姉様の苦しみを背負ってあげる番だから。神、お姉様と一緒ならどんなことだって。ありがとう、私の可愛い神。我らは狼やり。我ら大山に背負い宿命づけられたものなり。再び牢獄の門を開け、我らの父、僕はハンドルイザラは。
本当にいいの？ええ、それが私のハムナギとしての務めなり。困ったものね。お互い素直じゃない。
ええ、本当に。絶対にやぶいもんか。
他に方法はないのですか。本当にお別れなのですか。兄者様、他に方法はないのですか。本当にお別れなのですか。すまないアルル、それがしが不甲斐ないばかりに。
父さん、
ないばかりに。
アルル、これを。でもアルル、お願い。
あなたのもとでモノノフの本懐を遂げたかった。なぜだ、なぜアリジャを。アリジャ
我が目が悪魔さんこれで
う